Before God opens the door, He often allows you to sit in the hallway. Before your breakthrough arrives, there's a moment, a divine pause, where it feels like heaven is silent. Your prayers echo back at you, and life seems stuck. Before God opens the door, He often lets you sit in the hallway. And not just any hallway, but one that feels long, cold, and silent. It's that space in between prayer and promise, where you've knocked, cried, fasted, and still nothing seems to shift. You see others walk into their breakthrough, hear testimonies from people who were just where you are, and something in your heart wonders, God, did you forget me here? But this hallway, this sacred in-between, isn't the absence of God. It's the exact place where He begins to go to work within you. In the hallway, you start seeing things in yourself that you didn't notice before. Hidden pride, fear you thought you conquered, trust issues you buried deep. It's where God peels back the layers gently and firmly and shows you who you are without the spotlight, without the crowd, without the blessing. It's raw, it's honest, and sometimes it's painful. But it's not punishment, it's pruning. Because if the door opened too soon, what's broken inside you would break what's waiting for you on the other side. This hallway becomes a classroom, a place of quiet lessons. It's the place where you find a place, where you find a smile, and the deepest terrors begin to fade. It's the place where you find a calling, a purpose. It's a way of saying, this is not me. I will not be the way you think I am. It's the kind God teaches you how to trust His timing when your clock is ticking loudly in your ears. He teaches you how to walk by faith when your emotions are screaming for evidence. He shows you how to worship when you don't feel like it, how to stand when everything around you tells you to quit, how to love Him, not just for what He does, but for who He is. These are not small lessons. These are foundation, and He lays them deep. Often we cry for deliverance, but God is working on development. We want the door to swing open with favor, but God is more concerned with your formation. You can't carry the weight of your destiny with fragile faith. You can't manage the pressure of the blessing if you haven't been strengthened by the process. So He lets you sit, not because He's cruel, but because He's kind. He waits, not to frustrate you, but to fortify you. It's in this hallway that God builds the patience to wait well. He builds eyes that can see in the Spirit, even when your natural sight is dim. He builds ears that can hear His whisper over the noise of discouragement. He builds a heart that won't run when the next storm comes, because it already learned how to anchor in Him. What you think is delay is actually divine construction, not of things around you, but things within you. Sometimes in this hallway, God removes people. He strips distractions. He silences unnecessary voices. Not because you're being punished, but because you need to be still enough to hear the only voice that matters. In the stillness, He starts showing you parts of Himself you never noticed before as your comforter, your sustainer, your anchor, your source. You begin to discover that even when the door doesn't move, God is not stagnant. He is working in layers unseen, stitching together miracles in the background of your obedience. And while you're in this waiting place, you start to realize that this hallway is not empty, it's holy. It's not lifeless. It's full of revelation, full of testing, full of trimming, full of grace. God is close in the hallway, even if you don't feel him. He watches your tears. He weighs your faith. He catches your whispered prayers. He measures how you respond to silence, how you worship when there's no music, how you give when it costs you everything. And this space becomes sacred ground because it holds the evidence of your perseverance. What feels like a pause is really preparation. What seems like a delay is actually a doorway being shaped for your maturity. And the hallway, though long, though silent, though stretching, is the exact space where God sets the stage for the kind of breakthrough you're not just praying for, but the kind you're being transformed for. God won't send you into a promised land with a wilderness mindset. He is too wise, too intentional, and too committed to your future to let you walk into a blessing carrying the baggage of the past. When God delivers you from Egypt, from your past pain, addiction, brokenness, fear, he doesn't just aim to bring you out physically. He wants to bring you out emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, because freedom on the outside means nothing if your soul is still bound on the inside. You can't conquer Canaan with a slave mentality. In the wilderness, the children of Israel were no longer in chains, but they still thought like captives. Every challenge became a reason to complain. Every delay became a reason to doubt. Every obstacle looked bigger than their God. That's why God didn't take them the shortest route. He took them the transformational route. He let them walk in circles, not because he was lost, but because they were lost in identity, lost in trust, lost in purpose. And so he gave them time to unlearn their fear and relearn his faithfulness. This is why God slows the journey when your mind is still in Egypt. You might be praying for acceleration, but God knows acceleration without alignment leads to destruction. He loves you too much to allow your insecurity to ruin your inheritance. So he pauses the breakthrough until the bitterness is broken. He delays the blessing until your heart has learned how to manage honor without turning it into pride. He waits not to withhold, but to reshape your perspective to match his promise. Too many people want destiny without discipline, promotion without pruning, success without surrender. But God doesn't work like that. He is not just trying to take you somewhere. He's trying to make you into someone who knows who they are in him, someone who doesn't shrink when giants appear, someone who doesn't crumble under pressure, someone who has been tested in the dry seasons and knows how to worship without needing a miracle in hand. A wilderness mindset focuses on lack, fear, and survival. A kingdom mindset walks in faith, vision, and expectation. Until that shift happens, even the land flowing with milk and honey will seem unreachable. You'll self-sabotage what God sets before you. You'll see giants instead of grapes, walls instead of victory, fear instead of favor. That's why God confronts your mindset before he completes your miracle. You think he's ignoring your cry, but he's addressing your inner condition. If God opened the door before renewing your mind, you would enter the place of promise, still rehearsing the pain of your past. You would doubt every blessing, question every open door, fear every opportunity, and sabotage relationships that were sent to lift you. The wilderness is where he detoxes your soul from the poison of former battles. He's not just preparing a place for you. He's preparing you for the place. He's not only arranging what's ahead, he's rewiring what's within. Sometimes God allows scarcity to teach you sufficiency. He'll withhold the crowd to teach you confidence in his presence. He'll limit resources so that you discover he is your source. And in those places, your mindset begins to shift. You stop asking for signs and start standing on what he already said. You stop craving comfort and start seeking character. You stop looking for the shortest route and start trusting the deepest lessons. The wilderness becomes your training ground, not your final destination. Transformation always precedes transition. What you're going through is not just about what's next. It's about who you're becoming. You're not just stepping into a breakthrough. You're being built for it. And before God allows you to taste the fruit of the land, He will make sure your soul is no longer enslaved by fear, doubt, and disbelief. He will not place a crown on a heart that still thinks like a prisoner. So He works patiently and powerfully until you're no longer just delivered, but ready. The enemy doesn't attack empty vaults. When the battle intensifies, when the pressure increases, when everything around you feels like it's falling apart, that's not a sign that you're losing. That's a sign that you're carrying something valuable, something heaven deposited, something Satan fears. The enemy doesn't waste his weapons on those going nowhere. He targets those who are anointed, those who are close to breakthrough, those who are marked for kingdom impact. So if you've been under attack, if your peace has been rattled and your purpose seems clouded, it's not because you're weak. It's because you're dangerous to darkness. You were never meant to go unnoticed in the spirit realm. The moment you said yes to God, yes to purpose, yes to obedience, a target formed on your back. Because with every act of surrender, with every step of faith, with every prayer you whisper when no one else is watching, you are threatening the agenda of hell. The enemy knows something about you that you often forget, that your life carries divine potential, that you are not ordinary, that inside of you is a vision, a calling, a weight of glory that, if it ever matures, will shift atmospheres and set captives free. This is why attacks don't always come after sin. Sometimes they come after your progress. You think you're being punished for failure, but in truth, you're being opposed for your faithfulness. The moment you start healing, here comes resistance. The moment you start stepping out in obedience, the voices of doubt grow louder. The moment you start moving forward, confusion tries to cloud your clarity. It's not random, it's strategic. Because every step you take toward the will of God sends shockwaves into the kingdom of darkness. Hell isn't intimidated by empty people with loud platforms. It's intimidated by quiet people with full hearts. People who carry oil. People who walk in integrity. People who live out what they preach. The enemy is terrified of believers who are consistent in the secret place, who pray when they're broken, who worship through the storm, who don't just seek God's hand, but seek His face. These are the ones who shake nations not with noise, but with spirit-led authority. The pressure you're feeling isn't proof of abandonment. It's proof of assignment. God doesn't place weight on empty shoulders. If He's allowed you to walk through trials, it's because He sees you as capable. You are being crushed, not to destroy you, but to draw the oil out of you. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it stretches you. But what's forming in you through the fire is something eternal. Heaven is investing in your soul, and hell is reacting to the glow of that investment. You are being opposed not because you're nothing, but because you're becoming something that can't be ignored. The enemy is not just fighting where you are. He's fighting where you're headed. He knows if you ever walk into that place of clarity, that realm of faith, that zone of obedience, chains will break, strongholds will crumble, and generations will be transformed. So He fights early, He hits hard. He makes you question everything. Your calling, your worth, your voice. But even in that battle, even the midnight wrestling of the soul, God is still working. He uses the enemy's attacks to build your endurance, to sharpen your discernment, to deepen your dependence. There's a kind of warfare that only shows up when you're close. Close to healing, close to freedom, close to release, close to elevation. And just like contractions come before delivery, the spiritual pressure increases before destiny breaks through. That's why things have felt heavier. That's why your mind has been under siege. That's why your emotions have been like a roller coaster. Because something is trying to be born. Not just around you, but inside of you. And when destiny gets close, the devil gets nervous. What you're experiencing isn't a sign to give up. It's confirmation that you're carrying kingdom weight. The battle is real, but so is the breakthrough. You didn't come this far to collapse under pressure. You came this far because God saw something in you worth shaping, worth fighting for, and worth defending. And while the enemy may try to stop you, he cannot erase what God has already written over your life. God may be silent, but he's never absent. There are seasons when heaven feels quiet, when the prayers you've been pouring out don't seem to echo back, when the word doesn't jump off the page, when the spirit feels distant. And in those moments, your heart aches for a sign, for a whisper, for anything that says, I'm still with you. But God's silence isn't rejection. His silence is often strategy. He's not punishing you. He's positioning you. He steps back not to disconnect, but to draw something deeper out of you, something that doesn't rely on feelings but on faith. There's something holy that happens when God goes quiet. In that quiet, your trust gets tested. Your worship becomes pure. Your motives are exposed. Do you still pray when you don't hear back? Do you still believe when there's no confirmation? Do you still obey when you don't understand? God already knows what he's doing. The silence isn't for him. It's for you. It's where he watches to see if you've grown past needing proof and learned how to lean on promise. It's where your spiritual ears are trained to hear what can't be heard by the natural ear. When God is silent, he is often the most active behind the scenes. His voice may pause, but his hands don't. In the silence, he's lining things up. He's moving pieces you can't see, creating divine alignments, softening hearts, and preparing the way. What feels like distance is actually depth being built. He's stretching your spirit, strengthening your patience, and solidifying your foundation. You thought you were waiting on him, but in reality, he's been working in you. The silence also exposes the noise you've been depending on. When God quiets everything else, it reveals what you've really been listening to. The applause, the opinions, the approval, all of it fades in the stillness. And that's where he invites you to hear the whisper again. The whisper that doesn't compete with chaos. The whisper that doesn't need to shout. The whisper that says, be still and know. In that silence, you don't just learn about God, you begin to know him. The most dangerous lie the enemy tells in these silent seasons is that God has left you. But presence isn't always proven by sound. Sometimes it's proven by consistency. Like a good father walking beside his child, he doesn't need to speak every moment to prove he's there. His silence teaches trust. And trust that's built in silence becomes unshakable when storms come. The more you mature, the less you need signs. And the more you lean into the certainty of his character. There are stories in Scripture where God didn't speak for years, yet he was always working. From Joseph in prison to David in caves, to Jesus in the wilderness, silence preceded elevation. In each case, the quiet became the cocoon for transformation. It wasn't wasted time. It was holy time. God doesn't fill every moment with noise. Sometimes he allows space so that your soul can et back what it truly believes. Do you believe he's still good, still sovereign, still near, even when there's no thunder or burning bush? And while you're navigating this silence, the enemy will try to weaponize your emotions. He'll try to convince you that if you don't feel God, then you must have failed him. That if you don't hear him, then he's stopped loving you. But feelings are not always facts. And absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. God is not confined to your emotional radar. He is bigger than your senses, deeper than your discouragement, stronger than your silence. He doesn't disappear when you can't detect him. He simply waits for you to press in deeper. Sometimes the silence is the invitation to intimacy. It's God removing the distractions so that you learn to seek Him, not for what He says, but for who He is. He is still sustaining you, still covering you, still guiding you, even when you can't trace Him. What you think is a void is actually a veil. And behind it, He is preparing a breakthrough so personal, so precise, so profound that when it finally arrives, you'll understand why the silence had to come first. There will come a moment when everything you've been praying for feels further away than ever. The vision God gave you begins to blur. The passion you once had starts to wane. The calling, you question the promise, and some days you even question yourself. It's not that you stopped believing in God. You just don't know if you heard Him right. That moment is not the death of your calling, it's the deepening of it. When the vision fades from your sight, it begins to take root in your spirit. God often allows your external circumstances to contradict the internal promise to teach you how to walk by faith and not by sight. He'll give you a word and then lead into a wilderness where that word feels impossible. Not because He changed His mind, but because He's developing your spirit to carry the weight of what He spoke. It's easy to believe when everything looks like it's working. But what about when nothing makes sense? That's where real faith is born. Faith that isn't built on evidence, but on trust in His character. In that dry place, you're tempted to trade the promise for what's comfortable. You think maybe you misunderstood. Maybe the dream was too big. Maybe you got carried away. But what you don't realize is that the tension you feel is not a sign to retreat. It's a sign to press in deeper. God doesn't give cheap callings. The greater the promise, the deeper the pressing. And when your soul gets stretched beyond what you thought you could endure, that's when oil begins to flow. There's something sacred about being in the middle. No longer who you used to be, but not yet who you're becoming. That space tests everything. Your motives, your endurance, your priorities, your devotion. It's where God separates the hype from the holy, the excitement from the eternal. It's where you stop to perform for approval and start seeking His presence just to breathe. It's where your heart stops striving and starts surrendering, not to give up, but to be remade. The enemy tries to convince you in that place that you missed it, that you wasted time, that you're too broken, that you're too late. But God is not confined to your timeline. He is not intimidated by your doubts. He is not discouraged by your delays. In fact, He often uses delay to deliver you from pride. He uses disappointment to teach you how to anchor your identity in Him and not in outcomes. And while you're measuring progress by what's happening around you, God is measuring maturity by what's happening within you. The vision might look dead, but sometimes God buries things so they can grow. You thought it was over, but it was only planted. In the silence, in the darkness, in the obscurity, something is taking root. Every tear you cried watered the seed. Every prayer you whispered in pain nurtured the soil. Every time you didn't quit, even when no one saw, was preparation for the day when the vision would break through the surface. But what comes out will be different than what went in. Stronger, deeper, unshakable. God isn't in a rush. He's not pressured by your impatience. He's not rattled by your breakdowns. He is forming something eternal in you, something that can withstand storms, something that doesn't collapse under pressure. What He's preparing for you is great, but what He's preparing in you is even greater. And though you feel like you're stuck, heaven sees you as planted. Though you feel overlooked, God is focused on you. Though you feel forgotten, your name is still written in His plan. That moment of contradiction, when your reality looks nothing like the revelation, is not the end of the story. It's the part where faith is tested and refined, where your dependence becomes total, where your heart, stripped of every idol and expectation, learns to beat in sync with His will. And what you thought was a detour is really the direct path through the valley when your soul learns how to carry the promise with humility, strength, and relentless trust. You may be tired. You may be bruised. You may have walked through valleys that tried to take your voice, through storms that tried to drown your praise. But if you're still here, if you're still breathing, if there's still a flicker of faith left in you, then God is not finished with your story. You see, God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't overlook tears. He doesn't ignore silent prayers whispered in the dark. What you thought would break you, God is using to build you. What the enemy meant for harm, God is weaving into purpose. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize that even the crushing had meaning. There's glory on the other side of your groaning. There's healing beyond your heartbreak. There's power being born in the place where you were most wounded. And when God brings you out, not if, but when, you won't come out empty-handed. You'll come out wiser, stronger, deeper, with a testimony that shakes the gates of hell and reminds the world that God still restores. God still delivers. God still raises the broken. So don't quit now. Don't bury your hope. Don't silence your worship. You might be standing in the middle of the storm, but you are also standing the center of God's plan. He hasn't left you. He hasn't forgotten you. He's been walking beside you the entire time, silent maybe, but sovereign always. This is not the end. This is the shaping. This is the stretching. This is the sacred space between the promise and the performance. And if you keep trusting, if you keep pressing, if you hold on just a little while longer, you will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. So lift your head, wipe your tears, and